Best of the Best told the story of fighters chasing honor, discipline, and victory against impossible odds. But the real fight didn't end with the final match. Years after the medals and applause, their lives took turns no script could predict. What happened to them? Stay with us because their transformation in 2026 is more shocking than any on-screen defeat. Eric Roberts as Alex Grady. Eric Anthony Roberts was born on April 18, 1956, in Biloxi, Mississippi. At 33 years old, he played Alex Grady, the volatile, wounded leader of the American team, in Best of the Best, 1989, and returned to the role at 37 in Best of the Best 2, 1993. The films captured a man fighting for dignity through violence and restraint. In many ways, the character mirrored the life Roberts was already living. Eric's childhood was shaped by instability that never truly loosened its grip. His parents' divorce fractured the household early, leaving him emotionally unanchored. As a child, he suffered from a severe stutter that made every sentence feel like a test he was destined to fail. Speaking invited ridicule, silence bred isolation, and slowly he learned to retreat inward, carrying shame. That early emotional damage followed him into adulthood and seeped into intimacy. He lived for years with actress Sandy Dennis in a relationship marked by volatility, dependency, and emotional imbalance. In 1981, a catastrophic car accident left him in a coma for 3 days, causing permanent nerve damage that altered his behavior and emotional regulation. Recovery was slow and incomplete, reinforcing patterns of self-destruction that had begun long before fame. In 1992, Roberts married Eliza Garrett, hoping stability might finally quiet the chaos. Instead, addiction, public arrests, and emotional absence strained the marriage to breaking point. His relationship with his daughter, Emma Roberts, suffered deeply during these years, marked by estrangement and unresolved pain. Even as he earned critical respect for Runaway Train and later appeared in high-profile projects like The Dark Knight, his private life remained locked in cycles of guilt and isolation. Today, Eric Roberts is 70 years old and still working relentlessly, moving through roles as if motion itself keeps collapse at bay. His estimated net worth of roughly $4 million reflects a staggering body of work, over 700 credits, but also the heavy cost of addiction, legal battles, and survival. Phillip Rhee as Tommy Lee. Phillip Rhee was born on September 7, 1960, in Seoul, South Korea. At 29 years old, he played Tommy Lee, the disciplined moral center of the team, in Best of the Best, 1989, and reprised the role at 33 in Best of the Best 2, 1993. The films presented him as calm, controlled, and honorable. Behind that image was a life forged through pressure rather than peace. Rhee's childhood unfolded in the long shadow of war and displacement. After immigrating to the United States, his family struggled financially while navigating cultural alienation, leaving him feeling unseen and out of place. As a young boy, he endured bullying and deep loneliness, turning to martial arts at the age of 4 as both shield and identity. Training offered structure, but it also demanded silence, discipline, and emotional suppression far beyond his years. That same discipline later shaped and strained his adult relationships. Phillip married Amy Rhee in 1990, but the demands of filmmaking, constant training, and the pressure of carrying the Best of the Best franchise eroded emotional closeness. Work consumed his time and attention, leaving family life secondary to responsibility. The isolation he once felt as a child quietly returned, now disguised as dedication and control. Physically, years of martial arts competition and action filmmaking took a lasting toll. Chronic joint pain and recurring back injuries became part of daily existence, limiting mobility and forcing him to confront aging in a body trained to endure rather than heal. Now, Phillip Rhee is 66 years old and lives a quieter life as a martial arts instructor, filmmaker, and mentor, far from Hollywood's spotlight. His estimated net worth of about $2 million comes largely from ownership of the Best franchise and decades of teaching. His legacy is written in restraint, sacrifice, and the unseen cost of choosing honor over ease. Chris Penn as Travis Brickley. Christopher Shannon Penn was born on October 10, 1965, in Los Angeles, California. At 24 years old, he played Travis Brickley, the loud, cocky, reckless fighter of the American team, in Best of the Best, 1989, and returned to the role at 28 in Best of the Best 2, 1993. On screen, Brickley was impulsive and abrasive, masking insecurity with bravado. Off-screen, Penn was already fighting a quieter, more dangerous battle. Chris Penn grew up suffocating under comparison. Born into a famous family, he lived in the long shadow of his older brother Sean Penn, whose talent and acclaim arrived early. Praise rarely landed on Chris without comparison, and over time that absence of recognition hardened into resentment and self-doubt. His parents' divorce fractured the family dynamic, leaving him emotionally adrift, struggling to be seen as more than the other Penn. That insecurity followed him into adulthood and shaped his private life. Chris never married, drifting through short, unstable relationships that mirrored his inner restlessness. Without emotional anchors, isolation deepened, and substance use became a way to dull the constant sense of inadequacy. Even as he delivered unforgettable performances in Reservoir Dogs and Footloose, personal stability remained out of reach, eroded by addiction and unresolved emotional pain. His physical health deteriorated alongside his emotional state. Weight gain throughout the 1990s strained his heart, while long-term drug and alcohol use accelerated internal damage. His body became a silent warning he struggled to confront, even as work slowed and opportunities narrowed. On January 24, 2006, Chris Penn was found dead in his Santa Monica apartment at just 40 years old. The cause was cardiovascular disease, compounded by prescription drugs and substance use, with an enlarged heart sealing a fate long in the making. He was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $2.5 million, modest compared to his legacy, and painfully small compared to what might have been. Simon Rhee as Dae Han. Simon Rhee was born on October 28, 1957, in San Jose, California. At 32 years old, he played Dae Han, the disciplined, intimidating Korean fighter, in Best of the Best, 1989, and returned at 36 in Best of the Best 2, 1993. His presence on screen was controlled, powerful, and restrained. Behind that calm exterior was a life shaped by pressure from the very beginning. Simon's childhood was defined by displacement and survival. Raised between American and Korean cultures, he struggled with identity and belonging, often becoming a target of bullying and alienation. Early illness weakened his body, pushing his family to enroll him in martial arts as a form of protection and strength. What began as healing quickly transformed into relentless discipline. As adulthood arrived, martial arts became both his refuge and his cage. Simon never married, choosing instead to dedicate his life entirely to training, competition, and later stunt work. That choice brought professional respect, but emotional isolation, as personal relationships were quietly sacrificed for mastery. Even as he worked on major productions like The Dark Knight Rises and Inception, solitude became a familiar companion rather than an exception. The physical cost of that devotion eventually surfaced. Decades of high-impact training and stunt coordination left lasting damage, culminating in a severe injury in 2023 that resulted in partial paralysis. Movement became restricted, independence diminished, and the body that once defined his identity turned fragile. Today, Simon Rhee is 69 years old, living with the consequences of a lifetime spent pushing beyond limits. He continues to teach and mentor when his health allows, passing on knowledge rather than physical dominance. His estimated net worth stands at around $1 million, built through stunt work, instruction, and decades behind the scenes. James Earl Jones as Frank Cuozzo. James Earl Jones was born on January 17, 1931, in Arkabutla, Mississippi. At 58 years old, he played Frank Cuozzo, the stern yet deeply compassionate coach of the American team in Best of the Best, 1989. The role demanded authority, restraint, and emotional gravity. Those qualities were not learned for the screen. They were forged through decades of silence and endurance. His childhood was marked by an almost unbearable isolation. After his parents divorced, Jones was sent to live with his grandparents, a separation that coincided with the onset of a severe stutter. The condition became so extreme that he stopped speaking almost entirely, remaining largely silent for nearly 10 years. School became a place of fear rather than growth, and words turned into obstacles that trapped him inside himself. That silence followed him into adulthood, shaping how he loved and how he grieved. In 1982, he married actress Cecilia Hart, a relationship that became the emotional anchor of his later life. When Hart was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and passed away in 2016, Jones was devastated, retreating further from public life. The loss reopened old wounds of abandonment, leaving him to navigate grief with the same quiet endurance that had defined his childhood. Physically, his body carried its own long battle. Diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in the 1990s, Jones learned to manage illness alongside a demanding career. Even as his voice became immortal through roles like Darth Vader in Star Wars and Mufasa in The Lion King, his health quietly declined, marked by fatigue and respiratory challenges. Sadly, James Earl Jones passed away on September 9, 2024, at the age of 93, at his home in Pawling, New York, surrounded by family. His death was linked to complications from diabetes after a long, full life. With an estimated net worth of around $40 million, his legacy was never about wealth, but about overcoming silence itself. He was buried with national tributes, remembered as a man who turned muteness into one of the most powerful voices the world has ever known. Sally Kirkland as Catherine Wade. Sally Kirkland was born on October 31, 1941, in New York City. At 48 years old, she played Catherine Wade, the firm, emotionally guarded official overseeing the team, in Best of the Best, 1989. The role reflected authority and control. Behind it stood a woman whose life was anything but stable. Her childhood unfolded amid instability and emotional neglect. Raised by parents deeply embedded in the entertainment industry, Kirkland grew up surrounded by ambition but starved of consistency. Frequent absences, shifting homes, and high expectations left her feeling unseen and unprotected. Loneliness arrived early, and by adolescence she learned to equate worth with performance, a belief that would haunt her for decades. Romantic life brought little refuge. Kirkland married twice, first to Michael R. Jarrett in the mid-1970s, then to Mark Hebert in the 1980s, both marriages ending in divorce. Outside of marriage, she experienced a long trail of intense but short-lived relationships that repeatedly collapsed under emotional strain. Her health later became the battlefield she could not escape. Kirkland suffered severe reactions to injected silicone, leading to chronic inflammation and systemic illness that weakened her body over time. As she aged, cognitive decline set in, and dementia slowly stripped away independence and memory. Even as audiences remembered her acclaimed performance in Anna and appearances in films like The Sting, her private reality became one of confusion, vulnerability, and physical pain. Tragically, Sally Kirkland died on November 11, 2025, at the age of 84, in hospice care in Palm Springs, California, following complications from a severe fall, infections, and advanced dementia. She was buried quietly, far from red carpets and applause. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at around $50,000, a stark contrast to a career spanning over 250 productions. Ralf Moeller as Brackus. Ralf Rudolf Moeller was born on January 12, 1959 in Recklinghausen, Germany. At 34 years old, he played Brackus, the towering, merciless antagonist in Best of the Best 2, 1993. His physical presence dominated the screen, built on years of discipline and punishment. Strength was his language long before acting became his profession. Moeller's childhood unfolded under financial strain and working-class pressure. Raised in a laborer family, stability was fragile and ambition felt like a luxury. As a teenager, he turned to the gym at 17, not out of vanity, but survival, using iron and routine to escape limitation and insecurity. That same obsession followed him into adulthood and shaped his personal life. In 1990, he married Annette Moeller, and together they raised 3 children, but the marriage strained under relentless travel, competition, and filming schedules. Bodybuilding demanded total control. Acting demanded reinvention. The constant push fractured domestic balance, and the marriage ultimately ended in divorce in 2013, leaving behind distance and quiet regret. Physically, the cost of building a superhuman frame was unavoidable. Years of extreme training left lingering joint stress and wear that followed him long after competition ended. Even after transitioning into film, appearing in Cyborg and later achieving global recognition in Gladiator, his body remained both his asset and his burden, requiring constant management rather than celebration. Today, Ralf Moeller is 67 years old and continues to work selectively, mentor younger athletes, and engage in international film and fitness projects. His estimated net worth stands at around $8 million, built across bodybuilding titles, acting roles, and long-term brand work. Meg Foster as Sue Macaulay. Meg Foster was born on May 10, 1948, in Reading, Pennsylvania. At 45 years old, she played Sue Macaulay, the calculating, composed presence behind the scenes, in Best of the Best 2, 1993. Her performance relied less on force and more on psychological control. That quiet intensity mirrored the path her own life had taken. Her childhood was marked by displacement and emotional isolation. Frequent moves disrupted any sense of permanence, forcing her to adapt again and again before she could ever feel rooted. Loneliness became familiar early, shaping a guarded personality that learned to observe rather than trust. Stability was never inherited. It had to be constructed alone. Adulthood offered little emotional refuge. Foster experienced several intense relationships but never found permanence, and marriage did not endure. She later divorced actor Stephen McHattie, and even outside that union, long-term companionship remained elusive. Emotional separation followed her career, reinforcing a sense of independence that was both armor and wound. Her appearance became both gift and curse. The piercing blue eyes that made her unforgettable in They Live also led to typecasting and rejection, with producers forcing contact lenses on her to mute what they called distracting. After losing her role on Cagney and Lacey, the professional fallout echoed personally, damaging confidence and narrowing opportunities despite her acclaimed work in the Scarlet Letter miniseries. By 2026, Meg Foster is 78 years old and lives a withdrawn, reflective life away from Hollywood's center. Her estimated net worth is around $1 million, earned through decades of steady work rather than blockbuster fortune. Wayne Newton as Weldon. Wayne Newton was born on April 3, 1942, in Norfolk, Virginia. At 51 years old, he played Weldon in Best of the Best 2, 1993, a character quietly tied to power, money, and the darker edges of Las Vegas. By the time he appeared in the film, Newton was already a legend far beyond cinema. His presence carried decades of pressure hidden behind a polished smile. His childhood was marked by physical limitation and fear. Severe asthma kept him from playing freely, often confining him indoors while other children ran outside. The family struggled financially, and illness dictated every decision, forcing constant moves in search of better air and survival. From a young age, Newton learned that weakness could not be visible, even when it lived inside his lungs. That pressure followed him into adulthood and marriage. He married Elaine Okamura in 1968, and although they had a daughter, the union collapsed under relentless touring and emotional distance, ending in divorce in 1985. His second marriage to Kathleen McCrone in 1994 proved more stable, yet still lived under the shadow of public scrutiny, legal stress, and long separations created by his Las Vegas residency. Love existed, but it was constantly interrupted. Health and excess became quiet adversaries. Years of non-stop performing strained his heart, while gambling and financial risk-taking fed an illusion of control that later unraveled. Despite global fame from music and film appearances like License to Kill and Vegas Vacation, Newton faced bankruptcy in the early 1990s, lawsuits and accusations that nearly destroyed his reputation. Now, Wayne Newton is 84 years old and remains a living symbol of Las Vegas, performing selectively and representing the city he helped define. His estimated net worth stands at around $50 million, rebuilt after financial ruin through endurance rather than luck. Sonny Landham as James. Sonny Landham was born on February 11, 1941, in Canton, Georgia. At 52 years old, he played James in Best of the Best 2, 1993, bringing raw physical menace shaped by a lifetime of conflict. His screen presence was intimidating because it was earned. Nothing about him felt manufactured. His childhood was scarred by poverty and racial hostility. Of Cherokee and Seminole descent, Landham grew up confronting prejudice and exclusion in the American South. Violence and instability surrounded him early, teaching him to rely on strength rather than trust. Survival meant aggression, and vulnerability was treated as weakness. Adulthood brought no peace. He married multiple times, fathered children, and watched those relationships fracture through divorce and emotional volatility. Domestic life mirrored his inner unrest, escalating into legal trouble that led to prison time before his conviction was overturned. The damage, however, was permanent. Public trust eroded and isolation deepened. Though he achieved fame in films like Predator and 48 Hours, Landham remained trapped in supporting roles, often cast as muscle rather than complexity. Political ambitions later collapsed in scandal, fueled by inflammatory rhetoric that alienated allies and destroyed credibility. Each attempt at reinvention ended in deeper marginalization. Sadly, Sonny Landham died on August 17, 2017, at the age of 76 from congestive heart failure. He passed quietly after years of physical decline and personal isolation, with an estimated net worth of around $1 million at the time of his death. His life stands as a cautionary tale: strength without peace, fame without refuge. Louise Fletcher as Mrs. Grady. Louise Fletcher was born on July 22, 1934, in Birmingham, Alabama. At 55 years old, she played Mrs. Grady in Best of the Best, 1989, a role quiet but cold, carrying authority without raising her voice. By then, she was already marked by one of the most feared performances in cinema history. Even in stillness, she projected control. Her childhood was defined by silence long before it became her weapon. Both of her parents were deaf, and communication inside the home was fractured, heavy, and isolating. Spoken language had to be learned elsewhere, away from her family, leaving her emotionally detached at an early age. That distance shaped her inward discipline and her ability to observe rather than participate. Marriage brought little relief. She married producer Jerry Bick, and while they had 2 sons, the relationship fractured under career pressure and emotional distance, ending in divorce in 1977. Fletcher stepped away from acting for more than a decade to raise her children alone, a choice that cost her momentum in an industry that rarely waits. When she returned, Hollywood no longer knew where to place her. Winning the Oscar for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 1975, should have freed her, but instead, it confined her. She was repeatedly typecast as cold, manipulative women, from Flowers in the Attic to later television roles. In 2017, a stroke quietly weakened her body and slowed her presence, marking the beginning of physical decline after a lifetime of control. Sadly, Louise Fletcher died on September 23, 2022, at the age of 88, at her home in France. She left behind a restrained legacy, an estimated net worth of around $1 million, and performances remembered for their psychological cruelty rather than warmth. Her silence, learned in childhood, ultimately became her most enduring power. John Dye, as Virgil Keller. John Dye was born on January 31, 1963, in Amory, Mississippi. At 26 years old, he played Virgil Keller in Best of the Best, 1989, embodying youthful confidence, hiding uncertainty beneath. His role hinted at promise rather than dominance. That promise would define and haunt his career. He grew up under strict religious expectations that left little room for doubt or failure. Emotional pressure replaced affection, and faith became obligation rather than refuge. From a young age, Dye learned to suppress confusion and present calm obedience, a habit that followed him into adulthood. Acting became his quiet rebellion. Despite success on television, personal life remained empty. He never married and lived largely alone, drifting between projects and cities. Fame from Touched by an Angel and earlier work on Tour of Duty brought recognition, but not intimacy. The contrast between his angelic on-screen image and private isolation grew sharper with time. Career frustration deepened as leading roles disappeared. After Touched by an Angel ended, offers slowed, and the structure that once held him together collapsed. Without anchors, isolation turned inward, and health quietly deteriorated. Tragically, John Dye died on January 10, 2011, at the age of 47, in his San Francisco home. His death was ruled a heart-related failure linked to substance intoxication, and his ashes were later buried in Mississippi. With an estimated net worth of $3 million, he left behind success without stability, remembered for serenity on screen and silence in life. Time changed everything for the cast of Best of the Best. Some found redemption, others faded into silence, and a few never made it to the finish line at all. So which story shocked you the most, and which one stayed with you after the screen went dark? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if these untold journeys moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us for more then and now stories behind Hollywood legends.